I am sitting down with Emily Tweten. So I had the honor of meeting her at the Real Rooted retreat, and she was one of the women who was there with me, and her story was absolutely incredible. And I wanted you guys to hear a little bit more about her and her family and all of the things that she does, because she does a lot. So Emily, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself to get things rolling this morning.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Allie. I just want you guys to know that Allie is like one of the most assertive and aggressive drivers I've ever had the privilege of riding with.
That's right. I forgot about that.
That was an awesome ride to the airport that day. My name is Emily Tweten. My husband and I dairy farm along with my parents here in Southeast Minnesota. We have 4 children ranging from 12 to 4. And we dairy farm here. And I grew up on a dairy farm. And then both my husband and I grew up on dairy farms. We went off to college, and I didn't know that I would be dairy farming again ever. I went to school for liberal studies, and I lived in Spain for quite a while, and lived an amazing life and had worldly adventures, and married a guy who wanted to farm. We found a farm here in Southeast Minnesota about 10 years ago now, and we moved here. And I left my hospitality position. I was in hospitality for about 12 years, and decided that instead of going to town every day, about 50 minutes into town, and taking our kids to in-town daycare, that I would bring everybody back to the farm. We've raised the kids up here. And then I started a blog, and I've always been really creative. I can't sit still. I'm always doing something. And I thought maybe there was another farm wife, a mom, anybody who would want to benefit from the lessons I was learning by doing the projects that I was doing and that kind of thing. So I started a blog and a YouTube channel. And that's kind of where I happened upon Real Rooted. And I thought, what better way to kind of hone in on some skills and business building things. But really what I got out of that was way more than that. And it was like the friendship of you, Allie, and so many other women in that group. And I think getting to know those women and that kind of thing just kind of gave me a whole nother fire, just lit a whole nother fire in me. And I think, things are going to happen awesome for everybody here.
Yeah, it was kind of like, I really have struggled to find the words for it, because it was one of those experiences that unless you were there, you really cannot describe it. And it's been, I couldn't agree more. I feel like we were 25 strangers thrown in a little church together, and now we're like the biggest cheerleaders for each other. And it was really incredible experience.
It really was. I said, and I'll say it forever, like I feel like I was a different person walking into the church that day than I was walking out on Sunday afternoon. And I think I've completely embraced that. I think so many of us can kind of say the same thing, probably.
Yeah, I definitely. Even my boyfriend was like, "What happened to you when you were there? Like, you're different now." And I'm like, "No, but it's good."
Zen, and I am peaceful and happy with myself.
Yes, exactly. But I do want to talk a little bit about growing up on a dairy farm first, and then we'll kind of go through your evolution. But what was that like as far as kind of your role and what you kind of helped with?
So I'm the oldest of 3 kids, and we had about 300 cows growing up. We lived in a valley, so we didn't have a lot of room for expansion on our dairy farm, which led us to the next adventure. And growing up, I fed calves, I ran the bobcat and scraped the barns and milked the cows, that kind of thing. We milked 3 times a day when I was growing up too. And I can't say it was my favorite thing to do, but I learned a lot from it.
Yeah.
enjoyed the days where we could follow the mama cat to find her little nest of kittens and play with the dogs, and um, did a lot of help in the house with regards to making meals for food for the guys in the fields and baling hay and that kind of a thing. So we were kind of secluded. We were probably about, 30 minutes away from the rest of my friends in our school. We didn't have close neighborhood kids that we grew up with. We just kind of were on the farm, and we did fishing out of our creek, and there's just a lot of farm kid stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of brought that up too, because I can relate to that in the fact that we didn't have neighbors that were like my age to play with or anything like that growing up. Which that can be kind of hard as a kid because you go to school and everybody's been like, oh, I was at so and so's house this weekend or whatever it may have been. So that's kind of a different lifestyle that I think people don't really think about too when they're it's a great way to raise kids. Obviously, I wouldn't have had it any other way, but it can be kind of secluded and lonely sometimes too.
Yeah, and like so and so had a birthday party, and I didn't go because I was 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
Absolutely relate.
So fast forward to when you guys decided you wanted to have your own operation. What did that look like as far as, okay, we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it. This is what we want it to look like.
Yeah. So this farm came up for sale, and what was funny is I didn't even really get invited to come tour. I feel like the day that we bought it, they were like, hey, we bought a farm, and and it has a house on it. And I'm like, oh, maybe it would have been nice to see before we moved here, but whatever. You should be happy that there's a house there.
Right.
But it's all turned out really well, and we love living right on the farm. A lot of people ask us, like, do you like living on the farm? And we love living right here on the farm. There is some, not so great things about living on the farm. Like, you can't ever feel like you're away from the farm.
Mm-hmm.
You're always at work.
Right.
That's one thing that we struggle with, that where we've kind of concluded that if we need a break or if we want a break, we have to actually leave the farm. We have to get in a car.
Right.
Whereas I know friends of ours who are like staycationing at home. Well, that doesn't work for us. I have to put my farmer in a car and leave the facility in order to feel like we're away.
Right. Yeah. And that's hard too, I think, because obviously just having kids again that want to be with friends and all that kind of stuff, and being able to separate, like, nope, like we have to do this and this has to get done on the farm before anything else can happen type situation.
Oh yeah. And I mean, we've missed countless, events and weddings because, I don't know, the cows decide to get out
mm-hmm.
the minute we're leaving, or we get called back from an event early because, something happened in the parlor. It's just always, and that's just the risk of having business, is that you're the one in charge and you're the one in charge.
Yep. No one else to take the fall when things go wrong. That's for sure.
Right.
For you guys, is what you're like, so when you obviously you have a dairy, you've just explained that, but what does your milk, what is it used for?
Our dairy milk is used for fluid milk.
Okay.
It's picked up every other day here on our dairy farm. We actually have 2 dairy farm sites. So we have this site here, and then we have one a mile down the road. So we have about 350 cows at each facility, and that milks, both facilities milk 3 times a day.
Got it. And then it will go somewhere to get processed and then bottled and all that kind of stuff?
Yep.
Got it. So for when COVID happened, were you impacted by that in any way? As far as I know, there was people who were having to dump milk and all that craziness.
Yeah, it came close, and we have had to dump milk, but COVID was, I don't know. I mean, there was just such a flurry of people who were like, we can't come to work. We're like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to, I think everybody was in the same boat. Like, what do we do? How do we deal with these things? Will we be able to pay our employees?
Right.
big worry. Like, do we have to offload our staff because we can't afford to pay them because the milk prices are dumping? And I mean, it was just one thing after another. Crop prices and gas prices, and it was like one big snowball effect.
Yeah. And have you guys recovered from that, or is still things kind of a little iffy?
Slowly. I mean, thank goodness for the stimulus checks that have came through for small businesses. I don't know that we would have been able to make it. And there's honestly been so many dairy farms in our area. We have a lot of dairy farms in this area, and it's been very sad to watch these little dairy farms go out in the last 2 years just because either they can't, they just can't make it.
Yeah, that's such a, ugh, it's awful. It's been quite the year and a half, hasn't it?
Sure, I'm ready to move on.
Right. Close that chapter, on to the next.
Yeah.
Speaking of chapters, you lived in Spain. How cool is that? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in college, I minored in Spanish and lived in Spain in Barcelona. And in Barcelona, they speak a language called Catalonian, and which is a combination of Spanish and French. And going into Spain, I think I knew that they spoke a different language in Barcelona, but I thought I was ready and I thought I was prepared, and I really wasn't. By myself, and I met a whole bunch of students there. We went to the University of Barcelona, and I studied Spanish culture and language. And for the first whole month, I had a migraine every day because it was so hard to figure out the language and the difference between. So, like for instance, in Spanish we would say adios. Mm-hmm. In Catalonian we would say adeu. So there's a lot more French tones in the language. My host mom only spoke Catalonian, so we had to go between a Spanish and English dictionary and the Spanish Catalonian dictionary just to figure out what we were going to have for supper that night.
Oh my goodness.
So it was stressful, and it definitely pushed me. I journaled the entire thing, and someday when I'm old and I'm sitting on a recliner, I'll probably read through my journal. But it was definitely a time of like self-realization. I got to know myself a lot. I was by myself a lot, lots of time for thinking and writing and that kind of a thing. And I'm a super huge advocate for people traveling by themselves. My parents were very scared for me. They were very worried. I was also there during the Bush election, so there was a lot of turmoil with their country and our country. So a lot of our advisors told us to not admit that we were Americans, but rather to tell people we were Canadian. So we had to wear Canadian patches on our backpacks.
Oh my gosh.
We wouldn't get bothered, basically. It was a lot easier to say that we were Canadian than American and be able to not get razzed every time we went somewhere.
Wow.
And Spain was amazing. I hope someday to get back there. It's one of my main goals is to be able to travel more and show my kids the world. And I think the important thing that I got out of living there and living there alone was that the world does not revolve around the United States, and it doesn't revolve around who I am or where I came from. Mm-hmm. It's the entire world, and it's so important for all of us to know that there are other people living in different cultures and thriving. One thing that I did also get from that culture and living there was they work generally from like 8 until noon, and then we siesta from noon until about 2 or 3. That includes school kids. So everybody comes home from like noon to 3 and siesta. That means like tea, lunch, hanging out with your family, maybe some ball in the courtyard with your friends. And then from like 3 until 6, everybody goes back to school, back to work. And then everything is later. So like supper was like 8. Then you have dinner, drinks, and dancing by like 9 and 10. And this was like all through the week. This is not Friday, Saturday.
It was every night.
and dancing from like 9 to 10 to 12 to sometimes we get home at 1 or 2 o'clock. Everybody.
Wow.
And so they have such a more zest for life than I think they do here. And, you know, there wasn't this huge emphasis on working and climbing a ladder and making more money and keeping up with the Joneses. And they just live this way less stressed out life than what we have here. And
yeah.
When I came home, I was like, I'm going to change the world, and nobody's going to work like we work here, and I'm not going to go down that stressful path. There's so many things that can come from living such a stressed life, like just different diseases and cancers and that kind of thing. And I really don't think it's worth it. And when I lived there, they had never known, my host mom had never known anybody who would have ever had cancer before. Her mom was 112 years old, and she smoked and drank.
Wow.
112 and still alive. Never heard of anybody with cancer. And here it's like, it's not if, but when.
Right.
And I think we do that to ourselves. And I really wish it wasn't that way.
Yeah, that's how incredible that you got that experience. And I'm sure you've taken things from that you kind of incorporated into your life now. Probably some of the creativity stuff that you get to do and just constantly learning. I know that you mentioned that was a big part of your life. So how cool. Such a cool experience. But with kind of along those lines, your creative spirit is through the roof as far as you're always coming up with things. I'm always seeing the new thing that you're making or doing or trying or learning. Where does that come from? What are you currently working on? What's kind of on your list of things?
Yeah, so I go through seasons just like the weather does. Mm-hmm. And in the winter time, we're cooking and just sort of experimenting with bread making. I do a lot of sewing in the winter time. I have a whole sewing series in my blog, so because I've had so many people who are like, I really want to sew and I don't know how to sew. So I put a whole series together last year showing people the steps for sewing so that they can complete a task and do some projects. And then once it comes springtime, it's like full on gardening. We've doubled up our cut flower beds this year. So I'm also our market manager for our farmers market here in town. And we have been bringing cut flowers for the last few years and all of our vegetables and that kind of thing. Also, I do sheep hides, and we're getting into longhorns this year. It's just like one thing after another, and I get an idea and I think I can tackle it. I'll just figure out how to do it, call up some people and say, hey, how do I do this? And just learn and dig in. And I love the process and the challenge of learning something new. I think that's just an incredible thing and a gift that, that I just embrace every day.
Mm-hmm. And with the sheep hides, sorry, not to detract, but you said that and it made me think of it. So are those sheep that you guys are raising, or are you getting them from somewhere else?
Yeah, so we have a few sheep here. Our kids show some Southdown baby dolls for 4-H. So some of them have came from them, and some of them have came from farmers who are taking their sheep to market that have no longer use for their hides, and they either just get tossed into a dump, or I pick them up, rescue them, and turn them into something really amazing and fluffy and beautiful.
Oh yeah, wow, how cool. Dang, I need a sheep hide now.
Yes, I just started. So I have 10 of them completed now. So some of them will go to our farmers market, although it's really hard to sell a sheep hide in the summer.
Yeah.
But they are incredible because they have like a therapeutic notion to them. And they're also antimicrobial, which means they don't get dirty or have grossness in them. We just shake them out. I hang them on the line every once in a while, and people are attracted to touching them, and they're just amazing.
Yeah. And then the longhorns, you guys are going to start raising them, or tell me about that?
No, I have a friend who just keeps tossing me. This is just really gruesome, but it's just part of the game, right? Just tossing me longhorn heads.
Okay.
From, again, people who are just taking their animal to harvest and market, and the heads just get thrown away.
Yeah.
Some of them have these amazing long, long, long horns, and I'm going to figure out what to do with that. So right now I have 5 of them hanging in a tree in my backyard to process through the summer. It takes about 1 summer in order to remove all of the meat, and then I'm going to process them after that and figure out what to do.
Yeah. I'm sure you're tapping into a market there, because I know at least in Texas, everybody's got a cow head on their wall. So if you don't have any luck there, start aiming towards Texas.
Sounds good.
Well, Emily, I want to thank you for your time today. And the last thing we'll kind of go through is those rapid fire questions. So are you ready for those?
I think so.
Okay, so the first question is, what's your favorite season?
Summer, for sure. I'm somebody who loves the hot. I love the heat. I love the sweat. I feel like I might even be allergic to the cold. Like each and every year that we go through winter, I threaten to like sell the cows and then sell.
You're living in the wrong spot to not like winter.
I definitely am.
Then the second question is, are you a morning or a evening person?
I say I'm probably an evening person. It feels like it takes a while to get going with 4 kids in the morning. And then like by noon, I'm like ready to go until like 8, 9 o'clock at night.
Yes. Yeah, I'm definitely the same way. And I'm been working from home, and so I have to go back on June 1st, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be not good for me.
I undo all of these bad habits.
Yes. And then the last question is, if you had to describe your personality in a color, what would it be? I know that one's hard.
Probably yellow. I just feel bright and sunny.
Yes, I would agree with that after spending time with you, for sure.
The fact that I like hot in the sun, and that Hearty Sol, soul means sun. I don't know.
Yes, 100% yellow. Well, Emily, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I'm glad I got to learn a little bit more about your story, and hopefully someone listening was able to resonate with something. But if someone would like to connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
They can email me at emilytweten@yahoo.com.
Okay.
I also have a blog called Hearty Sol and a YouTube channel connected with that same name, and I'm on all of the socials.
Yep. And I will be sure to put all of that information in the description box on this episode. So please check that out. And Emily, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Allie. It was so fun to see you again. And